been almost 30 years since I did an elk hunting trip with my dad back in San Juan National Park, Colorado. It's kind of by the Colorado Springs area. Was about 19 going on 20, and arguably was probably in some of the best shape of my life. Now my dad at this point in time, it was a different situation. You know, he had just quit smoking. He had smoked for over 20 years. And he was in pretty decent physical condition, but his lungs were not in good condition, if that makes sense. So anyway, with that being said, we start out on this adventure to do this elk hunt. Now, we were told by a friend that at this point in time of the year, it would be 60s, 70s as far as temperature, and we get up there to the trailhead, and we're greeted by a team of horses, which we later found out is how we were going to get back to our hunting spot, because the trails that we were going to be on, too narrow for trucks, too narrow for four-wheelers. We were going to go back in on horseback. So the trailhead itself was about 6,000 feet elevation. We then jump on horseback. I have no experience on horses at this point in time. And we proceed to go up the trail for miles upon miles. It's cliffside, riding. In fact, the guide told me this. He said, hey, make sure that your foot is not in the stirrup of the horse on the side where it faces downhill. Just in case the horse slides down the hill, you can jump up the hill and not go with the horse. I'm like, okay. But then he reassured me that, hey, horses have 4 legs, not 2, so they've got better balance than you do. So I'm like, all right. Again, you're 19, 20 years old. The frontal lobe part of your brain isn't exactly established, and that's the one that deals with consequences. So this actually sounded like a good idea to me at the time, if that makes sense. So anyway, with that being said, we proceed to go up this trail to about 8,500 feet elevation, and that's where our campsite is at. Okay, so we get up there, there's about 15, 20 hunters. Everybody's coming in on horseback throughout the day. Now, the next day, we had another pack of hunters that were gonna show up. And so my dad and I, that first day we got up there, the sun was setting, sat around the campfire, high anticipation, and we were gonna go out the next day and go scout and see where we could find an elk that we could hopefully shoot. Well, what we didn't anticipate is that next day, some cloud fronts started moving in. Now, if you've ever been in the Rocky Mountains before, you're gonna see and notice very quickly that when the snow really starts falling heavy, you'll experience what we call a whiteout, which I know you're familiar with the phraseology, but has it ever happened to you before? Where you literally can't see 5 feet in front of you because the snow is falling so hard. This has happened to me before, snowmobiling in Yellowstone. It happened to me on the side of a mountain with my father. So anyway, with that being said, day 2 passes, this front moves in, and we wake up day 3 to a snowstorm. Now, the long and short of it is we proceeded to get 4 feet of snow in 2 days. We didn't have the gear for this. We weren't prepped for this. The guy that was actually going to be our guide for the hunt, when he came into the trailhead and jumped on his horse and went up that trail to 8,500 feet elevation, he gets into the camp area, his horse slips out from underneath him and falls on him and breaks his leg. And so now this guy's in the tent. He's just trying to stay alive. Search and rescue is on their way out. They have to walk back in and pull sleds. They can't get in there with the helicopter to get this guy. They can't take snowmobiles, so they have to truck it in, pull sleds behind him, and pull him out. Well, my dad and I were there with 20 other hunters, and we're like, okay, that morning, when the snow wasn't so bad, we decided to make our way out and to go hunt. So we trucked down the side of this mountain about 500 or 600 feet, maybe 1,000, down to a ravine, and then go back up the other side of the mountain. And my dad says, okay, I'm gonna go over there on the other side of those aspen trees. That's where you'll find me if you need me. No problem. And so I parked myself in my location where I thought would be a good spot for an elk hunt. My dad, he goes onto a different grove of aspen trees, and I know the general direction with where he's at. Well, the snow keeps falling. It falls heavier and heavier and heavier. And about 2.5, 3 hours into sitting in this spot, I quickly realized that I need to go get my dad because there's a good chance we're not going to make it back. So I go find him, and I was able to, thankfully, track him with his footprints in the snow. They hadn't totally been filled in yet. By the time I get to him, it's almost a whiteout. And so I look at my dad, and we have this conversation. Here's what the conversation is. We need to get back, and we need to do this right now. Now, at this point in time, my dad's pretty tired, right? Higher elevation, difficult to breathe. He's not in great shape with his lungs. You get the concept. We get to the side of the mountain where it's time to climb. And it's a pretty steep pitch. It's about like this. You're not walking up the side of this. We're going to have to crawl up the side of this. And at this point in time, I had to carry my dad's gun. I took his canteen, took his pack because he was gasping for air at this time. I was struggling as well. And again, I was 19, 20 years old in peak condition. This was really tough conditions. I'm surprised that my dad was able to do it actually. Okay, so we look up and we know the general direction of the campsite. We look up the side of this mountain and we casted a vision. We said, okay, at the top of this peak right here is where we're trying to get to. There's a warm fire up there, our tents are up there, and dinner is up there. Let's get up there. That's our vision. But then what we did is we chose a path. We said, okay, let's have some short-term targets and let's come up with a strategy and a goal. So we had different short-term targets to climb 10 yards here, 20 yards there, to different little precipices where we could rest. Because there was no such thing as resting in a fixed position like this on the side of a mountain. You had to find a little shelf where you could sit or stand and not have that gravitational pull downward. So we find these little targets along the way and we set a goal of 10 steps. We're going to take 10 steps and rest. 10 steps and rest. Now, during this stretch, it was really difficult for both of us. And I had a fleeting thought that if my dad were ever to have a heart attack, it would be at this point in time because the conditions were so difficult. Well, the long and short of it is, after about 3.5, 4 hours, we made it up the side of that mountain. We got back to the campsite. Not everybody made it back that day. Some of the guys were actually stuck out on the side of a mountain and spent 2 nights, not one, 2 nights under pine trees, trying to stay warm because they didn't try to make the trek back when we did. Okay, what's the moral of the story here? Well, there's a lot of different directions you could go with this, but here's what I want to point out to you. There's such strength towards having a vision, short-term targets, a strategy, and a goal. And I wanted to put this video out. I didn't want to do this on January 1st when everybody's, thinking New Year's resolutions because frankly, I don't really subscribe to them. I personally believe that all of us are going to work for a vision, strategy, and goal, whether or not you set one. And here's why I say that. You're going to work for one regardless with your job or whatever environment you support. And so I want you to think about that because a company that you work for, somebody owns that company and they've got a vision and a strategy and a goal for every employee in every department. Every business owner out there has a vision, strategy, and goal because they understand without that, they're going to go out of business. So there is no such thing as going through life without one, but there is such a thing as going through life without yours. And I don't think that has anything to do with the New Year's resolution. I think it has everything to do with understanding what you want, understanding when you want it, and understanding why you want it, and really, quite frankly, pursuing something that is bigger than just you. Call it a purpose, call it a vision, which by the way, all a vision is purpose and pictures. That's all that is. So with that being said, when I think about pursuing business or fitness, whatever it is, this applies to virtually everything in life. A vision is something that you're trying to achieve that you personally believe doesn't just affect you, but it also affects others in a positive way. And in many cases, a vision is larger than just your lifetime. So when I look at a vision, there's no exact timetable to a vision because I'm not 100% in control of when that vision comes to pass, even though I do look at it. So the equivalent of that was my dad and I, after we hit all these different checkpoints, our short-term checkpoints, and we would look up the side of that mountain and we would go, oh yeah, there's our vision. Now, where's our next short-term target? Okay, so everybody should have some sort of a vision that you're striving towards, that you're working towards. But then you also need to have a strategy, and that's your plan, that's your path. And here's what I've learned, a vision without strategy is all hype with no logic. And that tends to produce a lot of frustration. We have to have a plan. What is the plan that you're going to take? Now, your strategy has to be flexible because you don't know what you're going to encounter from day to day. Life throws you a lot of curveballs, and we're not 100% in control of what happens to us, but we are 100% in control of what we do with what happens to us. Okay, so I've got a strategy every single week as I approach my business, as I approach relationships in my life, the vision that I'm working towards. The question is, do you have one? And is that strategy flexible? What I've learned over time is typically the first strategy that I have Doesn't work, but it does get me a little further down the trail. And then I've got to set an additional strategy. This is exactly what my dad and I had to do on the side of that mountain, because as more snow fell, guess what? Our strategy changed over time. And we had to be flexible with that strategy. But then you also have a goal. Now, your goal is something that you're not flexible with. In fact, your goal is ironclad, and your goal needs to be built around two things: your activity and your attitude, which you have 100% control over. So your goal is really about your approach to the strategy, and the strategy is really about navigating a path to that vision. And in between the strategy and vision are short-term targets. I've got short-term targets that I'm trying to achieve every 3 to 4 months, okay, that are connected to a larger vision in my life. So I just want you to think about that as you're approaching different things that you're trying to accomplish in your life. Do you have a goal? Do you have a strategy? Is there an overarching vision that you're trying to accomplish? Because it's typically at this point in time in January when people give up on their New Year's resolutions. Well, there's a few reasons for that. Number one, that's because that New Year's resolution probably isn't tied to a purpose for your life. So it's really not a meaningful vision. The second thing is maybe you got confused between goal, strategy, and vision. Most people do. Most people set goals based on things that they don't have 100% control over, and it sends them on an emotional roller coaster and makes them unhappy. Last thing, and I'm done. There's a philosophy that I've subscribed my life to, and I actually learned this from a mentor of mine. And here's what he says. He says, how about you have a win the day mentality? In other words, I'm going to give it my best every single day. I can't control the outcome that I'm going to have. I can't control what other people are going to do, but I can control a perfect effort. That I can do. I can approach life with a positive mental attitude. So I want you to think about that. What's your approach? What side of a mountain are you trying to climb? Which of course is a metaphor, but what are you trying to accomplish with your life? Maybe it's time to rethink things a little bit and go, what do I want? Who do I want to be? When do I want it? Why do I want it? What am I looking to accomplish? What is my strategy and what is my daily goal? But I want you to think about this stuff as you approach vision casting, but most importantly, vision catching. How about that? Because we can take steps towards that if we simply understand this process.